Yeah. Very welcome to this session concerning influencers. My name is Thomas Randus. I'm the CEO and founder of IPQ, a firm that works with innovation law and produces valuable intellectual property. Although I like hearing my own voice, I will not be the main attraction here today. We will have some other people speaking. Danielle is here, Steve, Martin, Linnea back there, and Anna. So what about the topic of influencers? I thought about it the last couple of weeks when I've been seeing, we had elections in Sweden, guys. You might have noticed that. And I noticed that the famous question concerning milk prices does not exist any longer. How much does a carton of milk cost? Was a question that used to be asked to politicians. And if you didn't know that, shame, bad will, stigma. Today the stigma is not knowing who our largest influencers are. So socially, the concept of influencers is, fully accepted. And you guys all work with the influencer bit, so you all know that. What about the driving forces? As you all know, the position of marketeers has increased in value compared to 10, 20 years ago. And that's because you can convert. The conversion of exposure to money is so much easier, of course. And that also applies to influencer marketing. If I look at the Swedish Marketing Index, I see that the amount of money spent on from marketing budgets on social media has increased from 10% to a prediction of being 21%, I think, in 2021. So we actually see quite a rapid increase in this new marketing channel. Maybe it's not even fast enough. Why doesn't it grow faster is one thought that I've had. And the problem is probably people like myself, who's born 1966 and is 51 years old and believes that, the greatest marketing is something of editorial content. But today, consumers have their own icons. Although they produce marketing and the consumers know that it's marketing, we still remain loyal to our icons. The influencer has almost obtained the status of being an objective journalist in some cases, providing that they behave well. Stora Influencerpriset, the Great Influencer Prize, was instigated last year in 2017, for example. So will this growth continue, is one thought. We have the social aspects, we have the economy that runs it all. But what about some threats? And then I think about technology. Of course there's advancement in technology, because technology is also something that has driven the influencer concept. In a few years we will see neurotic or neurology being attached to information technology. And maybe the influencer as a middleman will disappear because the trademark owners will have direct contact with me as a consumer. That might be a potential threat that will abolish the influencer. Or maybe just that the platforms where the influencers act today, they're owned by a few market actors. We all rely on some entities that provide the platforms where we act. Politicians do not always like large concentrations of power. And sometimes they want to break that power. And if you break that power, that will also affect the influencers' potential to distribute their gospel. So that might be something that might affect us. When we come into politics, also other issues arise. I saw this summer that in Tanzania, there has been a registration fee for influencers. Anybody acting on the internet has to pay, I think it's like 10,000 SEK even to utter something on the internet. And they are closely monitored so they don't spread any immoral activities. Immorality on the internet often has to do with freedom of speech and not that much maybe with trademarks and goods, but that's not necessarily true. We work with clients who actually have problems with morality in the spreading of their trademarks and goods in some jurisdictions. But today, we're not going to talk about remote, strange jurisdictions. We're going to talk about, well, maybe some remote jurisdictions, but
definitely strange.
definitely strange these days, maybe. But I think the US has never really been that remote, for Sweden at least, although it's geographically far away.
Politically strange.
Yeah. Danielle is here. She leads the fashion division of Greenberg Traurig, who is one of IPQ's partners in the States. And you're a shareholder,
Yes.
which is important. I don't know how many shares you own, but in the States, yes. But we'll start with you, and you can kick this off. Thank you for being here.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for the introduction. Unlike Thomas, I'm not going to tell you how old I am. So I still think that I'm pretty relevant in this scene, even though my kids are like, yeah, no, Mom, you know nothing. So going to talk about influencer marketing disclosure rules in the US. And it's funny because I just was noticing before we started, I don't know if you can see it in the back, but there's a guy here professing his love to Kiara and he wants to marry her. And I'm thinking the poor girl now needs a restraining order from this guy. So a little bit about the fashion law practice. And this literally just happened to me the other week is, you know, somebody's like, oh, what do you do? And I'm a lawyer. And if they don't run screaming at that point, you know, the natural follow-up question is, well, what kind of law do you practice? And I said, well, I'm a fashion lawyer. And they're like, oh, that's so cool. That must be so much fun. And then they kind of look at me and they're like, yeah, I don't know what that is. I've never heard of that. So it is a thing. And it just touches on fashion and beauty in all aspects. So trade and customs, what do you put on a label? Of course, IP issues, how do you protect your designs? You know, customs, sustainability, and of course, marketing. So we're going to talk about social media and influencer marketing. So Thomas talked a little about disruption and what is, you know, there's been a lot of talk about, is influencer marketing on the bubble? Is it over? How we say in the US, has it jumped the shark? And then you see Kylie tweet, so does anyone else not open Snapchat anymore? Or is it just me? Ugh, this is so sad. And then Snapchat loses $1.3 billion worth of market share. So I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, yes, it's still absolutely relevant. They have an ability to enhance your brand or hurt your brand. So the presentation outline, we're going to talk about what is the FTC, who the regulations apply to and when, and how you can stay in compliance as a brand. So here's the boring stuff. Okay, so the Federal Trade Commission is a US government agency, and one of their main objectives is to promote consumer protection. And that's just truth in advertising, transparency. You want to make sure that you understand that, you know, is it really an ad or is this some organic love fest between the brand and the influencer? And so they regulate advertising, which includes print and TV, and that also includes social media. So Section 5 of the FTC Act ensures that online advertising is not deceptive. And they've set a pretty low threshold, so they've determined that an ad is deceptive if it misleads a significant percentage of consumers, which can be as low as 10 to 15%. So not a really high bar. So jurisdiction, and this is what you guys all need to be worried about here. So even though Section 5 is a US-specific law, it applies to all entities operating in commerce in the US. So if you have a US subsidiary, if you have an e-com site that's targeting the US, and the FTC has actually taken a step further. So they've said, to the extent it's reasonably foreseeable, which is one of those legal terms that lawyers love to dissect and can get tied up in litigation about for years, they said it to the extent it's reasonably foreseeable that posts, videos, etc., will be seen by and affect US consumers, US law would apply, and a disclosure would be required. So they're saying, if you're targeting US consumers, which is a huge market, it can be reasonably foreseeable that we're gonna come after you if you don't make the requisite disclosures. Now, query whether or not they're actually gonna do that. We haven't seen that yet in the US. unlike some other enforcement agencies like the DOJ and the SEC, it's yet to be seen if the FTC is going to take any action against a foreign corporation. So who do the FTC regulations apply to? So they apply to the influencers. So any fashion influencer or celebrity who receives free items. Free items. I get that question all the time from my clients. What if we just give them something, tell them to post? We're not paying them, we're just giving them our stuff and they'll post about it. Well, the FTC says, yes, you definitely have to make those disclosures because there's a material connection. They gave you something of value. You're not just posting it because you love it. You were basically told to post it. And that also applies if they just give stuff in no direction. So a lot of clients, a lot of brands just send out stuff hoping that the influencers are just going to love it, wear it, post about it. Well, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, you know, it's a duck. Same with advertising. You're not sending it out there just because you want to just give them free stuff out of the goodness of your heart. You're giving them the stuff so that they're going to post about it and that everybody's going to see it and then buy your product. So it applies to endorsers who receive free items, and of course, if it's paid for advertising. So the FTC has actually been quite candid about what it does, and they've said they don't generally monitor bloggers or influencers. But if violations come to their attention, then they will take action, maybe, and evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. So they are generally put on notice by consumer watchdogs like truthandadvertising.org, which hates a certain family of famous sisters. And they've been dogged about sending letters and notifying the FTC. And of course, the FTC regulations apply to brands, advertisers, and their ad agencies and public relations firms. So what I like to say is everybody's got skin in the game, right? Like everybody's got exposure here. So you have to make sure from the influencer to the brand that everybody knows what the rules are. You have to make those disclosures. And sometimes your competitors could be a source of information, right? You know, somebody might call up and say, hey, you know, Zara's influencers aren't posting the requisite disclosures. I think you guys should take a look at them. So, you know, you've got these consumer watchdog groups, your competitors. You have to make sure that you're doing everything on the up and up.
Sorry, Danielle, I forgot to ask. Do you take questions? Do you want to ask some
Not from you. Yes, but if you have a question, please, by all means, ask away. And so what do they require? So the FTC generally thinks that the US consumer is dumb. And they've said that it's not common knowledge that influencer bloggers are paid to post. If you guys are like me and have, you know, follow a bunch of people on Instagram and you can just tell what's paid for advertising, like, you know that none of these people are really like, oh my God, I love this product, I'm just going to post about it. You know that these people are making a fortune, especially the beauty influencers, to post about a certain product. So the FTC disagrees with me, and they've said that it's not common knowledge, so therefore we have to make these disclosures, right? And so they've said if there's a material connection between the brand and the influencer that consumers would not expect, and it would affect how consumers evaluate the endorsement, that connection should be disclosed. And so examples are if you're a relative or an employee of a brand, if you were paid to promote a product, again, if you're given the product for free in exchange for an endorsement, or even if there's no instructions, and if you have an ownership interest in the brand, right? And we'll see a couple examples of that later. So if there's some sort of material connection, you have to make those disclosures. So how do we ensure that our disclosure complies? If you take anything from this presentation, remember two things. So when you're making a disclosure, that disclosure needs to be clear and conspicuous. So the FTC's actually done a really good job. If you go online, they have, you know, a link for their guidelines, and they use non-legal speak, which is really nice. They have real life scenarios, questions and answers. They've actually had a session on Twitter where people were going on and asking questions about, you know, if I do this, do I have to make that disclosure? What about this? And so they've been really, really good about using clear language and speaking to just an ordinary layperson about the rules and regulations. So they use these 4 Ps to determine if it's clear and conspicuous. So prominence, is it big enough to read, right? You don't want to bury it in tiny print. Color matters, again, black and white is fine. You don't want to do weird shades of gray or like pink and red. You have to be able to see it. It has to be clear. Presentation, is it worded in a way that consumers can easily understand? Hashtag ad is the easiest way I think everybody can understand. It's 3 characters. You can use it on Twitter, Instagram, on an Insta story. I mean, it's just the easiest way to do it. You don't have to use hashtag ad. Everybody's kind of wrapped around the axle that hashtag ad is the only thing, and that's what they say to do. But if you want to be more creative, more organic, all you have to do is just make that disclosure. Like, thank you, Louis Vuitton, for the gift of, the bag or something like that. You can be creative as long as that disclosure is made. So you don't always have to use hashtag ad, which I know brands like to do. I was at a presentation and the creative director of a very well-known brand got up there and said, well, hashtag ad just isn't sexy. I was like, well, it's not sexy, but neither is an FTC enforcement action. So you might want to reconsider and use something. So is it worded in a way that they can easily understand? Placement and proximity, fairly similar. Is a disclosure where consumers are likely to look? You don't want to hide it. And is it next to the claim it modifies? So you want it kind of like up front, right after, whatever you're saying about the product. And for Instagram, they said it needs to be before the more button, which is hard to do. So you got to get it up front. Again, you want to be compliant. They like terms like ad, paid advertisement, sponsored, promoted. They don't like abbreviations. So spawn, hashtag SpawnCon, that doesn't, they'll say that's ambiguous. So these are all terms that they like over there that are easily understood by consumers. They don't like, so this has changed a little bit as social media and this influencer marketing thing has really become such a major part of society. They don't like terms like ambassador, collab, influencer, partner, or thank you brand. They now say it's okay if you do hashtag Amex ambassador or whatever brand partner, or thank you for the gift X brand. But you just can't say thank you brand. So these terms on their own are not okay, but if you use them in connection with the brand, then the FTC has now said that those are clear. So that's okay. So social media platform tools that everybody thought was going to be the savior of this whole issue, right? So what you see here is, the paid partnership on Instagram that you see now, or sponsored by blah, blah, blah. The FTC has said, and Heather Monahan is one of my best friends, and she doesn't know that I'm using this thing. So anyway, but she actually came out with a book, which is a hit on Amazon, which is Confidence Creator. So that's my plug for her in case she finds this out because it's being videotaped. No, you should check it out. And I'm not paid to make that. I actually had to buy the book. So according to the FTC, they've said that don't assume the disclosures built into the platforms are sufficient. FTC staff doesn't think that the built-in YouTube and Facebook tools suffice. The same applies to the built-in Instagram tool. So this on its own wouldn't suffice, according to the FTC. You would have to have the disclosure also down in the body of the post, because the FTC feels that when you're scrolling through Instagram, you're not really going to pay attention to what's up here. You're going to look to see what's down there in the content. So what should a disclosure not be? So along with the FTC thinking the average US consumer is dumb, they also feel that we're lazy. And that actually might be true because they don't feel that the average US consumer is going to go to a secondary source to see where the disclosure is made. And you know what? They're right. I wouldn't do this. So you want to avoid making the disclosure in a hyperlink. You want to avoid making it so far down that you have to keep scrolling and you'll miss it. And then you don't want to just place it on a profile page, again, because it's a secondary source. And if your influencers are constantly posting about a product, because, I mean, your contract with them is going to generally say you have to post X amount of times and say XYZ and blah, 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 blah. Every single time they have to make that disclosure. So they can't just do it once and then think that everybody's going to know, because somebody might start following them midway through. The Kardashians. So all of this, I don't know if you guys remember a couple years ago, Kourtney Kardashian's ex-husband, Scott Disick, who was paid by a company to post about a product. I think it was like a smoothie or some sort of drink or whatever. So his PR firm sent him the instructions, and he posted the picture and cut and pasted the instructions, which was, take a picture of you with the product, say X, Y, and Z about the product. We'll pay you, $1 gazillion for the product. So, he just cut and pasted it, and then everyone was like, oh my, wait, he doesn't really love this? Like, this is all fake. This is advertising? Like, oh my God. And so, what happened was the New York Times published an article called Endorsed on Instagram by a Kardashian, but is it love or actually an ad? And so it touched on the trend of what we now know is paid advertising. And they pointed out that Kylie originally had a picture of a mansion in the Turks and Caicos, and she originally said, thanks for the birthday home at Airbnb, which could mean, we all know that it doesn't, but it could mean that, look, Airbnb, she paid for the home, and thank you so much, it was so gorgeous, right? She had to change it to thanks for the gift of a lovely birthday home at Airbnb, which then says, okay, well, she was obviously given this for free. This all happened after truthandadvertising.org sent their lawyers a letter and said, look, you gotta either take all this stuff down or change it or do something, because you guys are gonna be in big trouble. So they did. And so this was really kind of 2016 when a lot of stuff started happening in the FTC enforcement world. So this is one of the big cases that came out in the US. So FTC charged Lord & Taylor for violating FTC regulations. So what'd they do? So first, they paid for an article to be published in Nylon magazine, and for this paisley dress to appear in the IG feed and in their magazine, and they didn't tell Nylon, look, you have to disclose that it's paid for advertising. On top of that, they paid 50 fashion bloggers to go ahead and post about the paisley dress, and they didn't disclose, nor were they told to disclose, that they were given the dress for free and that they received money for it. So dress sells out in like record time. And the FTC said, okay, no, you can't do this, right? This is a huge problem. And one of our partners was actually, this is a little bit of inside baseball, but one of our partners represented Lord & Taylor when he was not with our firm. And I said, look, what was keeping you up at night at that time? And he said, we were so afraid that the FTC was just gonna shut down our online marketing. Full stop. And for that to happen that's the death knell for any company, right? I mean, if you were told to like shut down your influencer marketing or online marketing, I mean, that's the death knell of any company. So Lord & Taylor got lucky. They settled with the FTC and entered into a 20-year consent order, which means they agreed not to violate the law for the next 20 years. Shouldn't be violating the law anyway. Okay. So after Lord & Taylor, we see a little bit of movement by the FTC. So, in April of last year, the FTC sent a bunch of letters, and they sent them to celebrities, they sent them to influencers, and they sent them to brands. And they said, this was like, if you don't know, now you know. Here are our guidelines. This is what you did wrong, and fix it. And so I thought what was interesting about what happened here was that most of the celebrities were big names, right? So you had like the Kardashians and you had I'm not saying that these were actually the celebrities, but I'm just using as a hypothetical, but like, you know, the Hadid sisters, those big type of influencers. But the brands, with some exceptions, were on the small side, right? So what that says to me is the FTC is really more concerned about the reach and the amount of consumers that are affected. So if you're a small brand who happens to have like a great relationship with like a Hadid sister, like good for you, but make sure that if she's promoting your product, that she makes the requisite disclosure. So just because you're a small company doesn't mean that you're going to be outside of the jurisdiction of the FTC and they're not going to notice. So when you're working with like big names that have a big following, you know, you want to especially be careful. And I know the trend now is like micro-influencers and things like that, so you get more targeted. Bye, Steve. So anyway, the letters were like, here's the shot across the bow. Now you guys are on notice. And the results were the intended results. They took down the post, they altered the post, and they made sure that they complied with the law. So here, this example, prior to fall of 2017, the FTC really only took action against the big brands. And so there was always a lot of chatter about whether or not they were going to take any action against the influencers themselves. And they thought maybe the Kardashians, because of truthinadvertising.org, that didn't happen. So this was their first case that came out where they started an enforcement action against the influencers. And in this case, the guys endorsed an online service, CSGO Lotto, and they didn't disclose that they owed a substantial portion of the operator. And the FTC said, well, the videos and posts could imply that the Lotto company was in fact operated by an unaffiliated party. To add insult to injury, those guys also paid a bunch of influencers and said that they didn't have to disclose, they didn't instruct them to disclose that there was a material connection. So this is a pretty egregious case. You know, the FTC took action, and again, they entered into a consent order not to violate the law. There's Tyra smizing. So we'll go through some examples. So here we go. I'm ecstatic to announce my latest partnership with EcoTools. Stay tuned for my first video with them to launch this week. Hashtag ad. Does that comply? It's probably about as clear as it'll get. So yeah. Okay, this one. You guys know that I'm a skincare fanatic. I love to start my daily skincare routine with the SK2 facial treatment essence before applying my makeup, blah, 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 blah. Hashtag my essence, hashtag in partnership with SK2. So I've been using this example in all of my presentations, and I'm still hoping that somebody will like let SK2 know that I'm using this example, because I love their product and it would be so amazing if they would send me this stuff for free because it's so expensive. So if any of y'all have connections, that would be great. I'll hashtag add it all the time. Anyway, so when I started doing this, it was hashtag in partnership with SK2. And back then, the FTC really didn't love the word partnership because they thought it was ambiguous. So that was a big X. But now they're like, okay, in partnership with, and you have the brand, it's fine. So we've now changed it to, it's good. Okay, I'm not sorry. So I'm from Miami. And so these are some Miami influencers. And so what we have here is twinning in Monty Swim, tan by Tatan Miami, hashtag visits Tulum, hashtag Tulum Beach, hashtag Tulum Mexico, hashtag be Tulum. No disclosure. Probably 3 different brands. I know for a fact they're not giving those bathing suits back. The tan was for free. And they're now in like Be Tulum is a resort. And so again, if it looks like an ad, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, yeah, it's an ad. So that one obviously doesn't work. Do you guys know Bikini a Day? Okay. And Tosh and Devin and okay. So Tosh and Devin started a company, Monday Activewear and Monday Swimwear. And so and they're amazing, and I love them. And so, but here she posts, lover of love at Monday Swimwear. So this is her brand, and I don't know, unless you know who they are, you wouldn't know that that was her brand. So again, the rules say if you have some sort of ownership in the brand, you have to make that disclosure. So, sorry, Tosh. So this one, 2-in-1 foundation. I finally put this guy to the test. Make sure you don't miss the review. At Clinique, hashtag beyond perfecting, hashtag ad, hashtag simply Tanya, hashtag. So what do you think about that one? Would that one fly? So I put a question mark. So if it was my client, I'd say it's fine. And here's why. 1, I think hashtag ad is close enough to the claim. 2, I think if you had couple more hashtags, it would probably look a little bit buried, and you can't bury hashtag in a bunch of other hashtags. So because it's close enough, it's the second hashtag, I think that would be fine. To make it perfect, we'd put it in the first one and maybe not so many hashtags, but it's fine. So how can brands comply? So every company should incorporate 4 things into its influencer marketing program. And so I work with a lot of companies on their influencer marketing program. And the first thing is you want to explain to influencers what they can and cannot say about the product. And that's just good business, because you don't want your influencer saying something wrong about the product, making claims that can't be substantiated about the product. God forbid they say something negative about your product. So you want to tell them what they can and cannot say. I don't know if you guys saw, but Goop, Gwyneth Paltrow's company, was just fined by the state of California for $145,000 for making claims that were not backed about one of their products that was not backed by medical science, right? So you don't want, if you're a weight loss program, you don't want to go say, okay, well, if you take this pill, you can lose, you don't want them saying you can lose 20 pounds in a week. We know that's not true. If it is true, please get me that pill and I'll talk about it all day long. So you want to make sure what they can and can't say about the product. You want to instruct them on how to disclose their relationship to the company, why they have to do so. Again, everybody's got skin in the game. There's exposure for everybody if they're not following the law. You want to monitor the influencers. So monitoring is key. You just don't want to just send them off and let them go and you have no idea what's going on. Also, because when you get an enforcement action, you want to make sure that you can document, that you've documented, you have your contract, you have your emails with them, you've told them what they can and cannot say. Because essentially what the FTC is going to say is, you violated the law, you violated our regulations. And you're going to say, no, I didn't. Well, how are you going to prove that? You're essentially trying to prove a negative. So you can prove all of that with documentation. This is what I told them to say. Here's the guidelines that I gave them, blah, 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 blah. Here's the contract. And also in the contract, what I usually put is a termination clause if they violate the law. I want to be able to immediately get rid of them if they violate the law or they don't follow the regulations. And I think morals clauses are also good too, especially you guys have all seen kind of influencers kind of go off the rails and do something insane. So you don't want them to tarnish your brand or ruin your reputation. So if they do something that can harm the brand, you want to be able to terminate that contract. And again, if they're posting questionable claims or not following up, you want to have options, right? You want to be able to counsel them, again, document that, train them, or just cut it. So here's the scary stuff. What's the downside? So the downside is disgorgement of profits earned from the violation, right? So all the money that they got from selling out the dress from Lord & Taylor, they would have to give all of that back. This is even scarier, which is the injunction preventing the company from marketing activities. That's the major one, right? They have the power to do that. They'll just shut you down. What we've seen is the consent judgments to abide by the law. If violated, there are significant fines. There are no fines for violating the act in the first instance, which is kind of, you'll see articles and they don't really have it right, but there are no fines for violating in the first instance. They'll put you into a consent order, and then when you violate it, if you violate it, that's when the fines kick in. So also a downside, the cost of retaining somebody like me to defend against an enforcement action, that's going to be expensive. And it's really intrusive into your business while you're trying to run a business, and then the FTC is saying, like, give me all your documents, like pulling people in for depositions. That's not fun. And if you're a publicly traded company, the potential drop in stock price. The FTC loves to, all government agencies in the US love to send out press releases when they, catch a bad guy. And so, your investors will not love that. So that's the downside. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to take any. Yes.
So what if a brand then tells an influencer, like in the contract, for instance, that they need to make the disclosure, and the influencer does not follow that instruction anyway? Could that hurt the brand?
The question was, what if you tell your influencer to make the disclosure and they don't do it? Could it hurt the brand? It definitely leaves the brand open for liability. Probably not the first one, but that's why monitoring is key. If you see that, then you want to say, okay, influencer, here are the guidelines again. Again, put this in writing so that you can have it as backup in case you need it. Here are the guidelines again, and under the contract, if you don't follow it, we can terminate you immediately. So that's what I would do. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is it as you pointed out, we have a lot more micro-influencers nowadays?
Mm-hmm.
Is it still as strict with them to ensure that they're following the guidelines? Because if you have like 20 of them not doing something right, is that going to affect as severely as, say, you have one big influencer violating that?
So the question is, if micro influencers, let me get this right. If you have a micro influencer, and I'm saying this because the camera can't pick you up, so I'm reading. The question is, if micro influencers don't follow the rules and you've got like 20 of them, is that going to hurt as much as if you have a big one? Yeah, the FTC doesn't draw a distinction as to whether or not it's a micro or just like, a huge influencer. I think what they're concerned with is the fact that the brand and the influencer are not, doesn't matter who you are not, the brand is either not giving them the right direction and they're not following the rules. So it doesn't matter who you are. That being said, I don't know if the FTC would take notice of micro-influencers. They said they don't monitor, so unless you have a competitor that's really wants to give you a problem, then maybe. But again, I think that they're more concerned about the amount of consumers that are potentially deceived by deceptive advertising.
So you spoke about like the market above the posts on Instagram and how that's not sufficient enough and how people tend to miss it. Do you think that, for example, like Instagram or Facebook will take some more actions, like just hypothetical, like how will they be like developing another sort of branding tool or anything, just like out of curiosity, since it's I don't know, the hashtag thing might not be good enough in some countries, I know.
Right.
For example, Denmark doesn't like that and take that as an efficient way to mark as an ad.
Okay. I can't repeat that question. But I got it. Do I think that they're going to come up with another tool? I don't know the answer to that question. I really don't. Probably if I think that the FTC is going to start really making it a problem. I do know because of my friend Heather, when she posts some stuff that's, even though I tell her, I'm like, yo, you got to do hashtag. What are you doing? And she's like, yeah, the Instagram tells me like this appears to be sponsored content, and they won't let her post it. So I don't know if they're policing it behind the scenes. So, but it'll be interesting. I mean, I'm sure that they'll do something to make it easier because they get paid to, yeah. So, anyone? Well, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Introduce my partner, Steve, who is our intellectual property specialist, who's going to talk about trends in... what are you talking about, Steve?
It's a good question. Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk just very briefly about some kind of hot issues that have come up in the IP area as affects, I think, what a lot of you people do. In other words, you're working with branding issues, how to effectively get your brands communicated to the public. What can you do to build up your brands, and then some issues that have come up around the influencer space that involve some kind of tricky copyright issues, actually. So let's just get started. So this is a case involving basically taglines. Now, I know there are people here from a lot of different companies, a lot of different industries. I know some of you are in the travel business, some of you in the apparel business, other electronics, consumer products, that thing. How many of you in any of your branding campaigns use taglines or slogans in addition to just your regular house brand? Show of hands. Okay, so so we talk about taglines and slogans, and obviously one of the most famous ones is Nike's "Just Do It." So a tagline, even though it may just be some ordinary words put together, it can actually over time have some real trademark significance. So this was a case involving this company Love Made that that had this trademark Love Made, and been using them. Love Made Me Do It for since 2013, as you can see there, and then Victoria's Secret came along later and used this same tagline on tote bags and other kind of promotional items. This is a case right now, it's pending, it hasn't been decided, it was just recently filed, but I think one of the interesting issues here from a branding perspective is what Victoria's Secret has argued in defense, and that is basically, they're not using it as a trademark, they're using it just kind of as an ornamental design on on a tote bag or some other type of article of apparel. And that there's this concept of fair descriptive use, and they're just making fair descriptive use of this phrase on their tote bags and whatnot. But this is, I think it points out the importance, I think, for a company like Love Made to to really kind of build brand recognition in taglines. Okay, sorry that we have another Kardashian story to tell here, but this is an issue that's come up recently, which is really interesting, and it involves celebrities getting photographed by paparazzi, and then the celebrities want to post that on their on their Instagram, on their Facebook page, or whatever, and so that's what happened here. Khloe Kardashian got sued by this celebrity photo company, basically a company that hires paparazzi to go take pictures of people, and they said that she needed a license from the copyright holder of the photograph in order to post it on her Instagram account. And apparently this photo was licensed, limited purpose for the Daily Mail, the newspaper in the UK, to use in their in this particular story. But Khloe took the photo apparently, and she took out or removed the copyright notice, which indicated that it was copyright, exposure photos, LLC, whatever. And the photo agency said that, well, this is really a valuable asset of ours because Khloe Kardashian is such a well-known celebrity, so therefore this photo has a lot of value to us, and therefore, Khloe, you're using it without a license from us is really causing us some real economic damage. So basically what happened, Khloe now licenses photos of herself that she posts on Instagram. And one thing that, a takeaway that I think is really important here is that it's not sufficient if you are looking to use a photograph taken by somebody else simply to credit the photographer or the agency that actually owns the copyright to the photograph. You need to get permission or take a license or pay, a one-time fee in order to be able to use that photograph. And in this this whole Instagram influencer environment, you have fan accounts, and the Kardashians have all these fan accounts, and they are now being disabled by Instagram because of copyright violations for the same reason that Khloe had to take down that photo of herself. The fan accounts are saying, well, we should, since we're fans, we should be allowed to use these photos. This is fair use. It's not copyright infringement. We're just using it for the purpose of, not really for any commercial purpose, but really for, expressing our love for these celebrities that we're obsessed with. So, will that argument fly legally? I think probably not. I mean, basically, the fair use exception, it's very specific. It applies, as you can see there, to criticism, comments, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. And basically, if it's, you're in the nonprofit educational space or other non-commercial uses, it can apply there. But I think the fan accounts are going to have a hard time with that argument. Just rounding up another issue that that's actually kind of come to the fore recently in the influencer and social media space is this concept of right of publicity. Now, right of publicity it's a creature of U.S. law. Basically, it says that any person or a person, doesn't have to be a celebrity, owns the right to commercially exploit his or her name or likeness. So basically what it means is that I can prevent someone else from exploiting my name or my image or likeness without my permission and making money off of it. And you see this comes up very often in the context of Hollywood celebrities. There are cases involving the estates of Marilyn Monroe and Michael Jackson and Jimi Hendrix. And so this is a well-established principle in U.S. law, and it's come up recently. I say here the best defense is a good offense. This is, for those of you who don't know, this is Odell Beckham Jr. He plays wide receiver for the New York Giants in the National Football League. And he actually decided to turn the tables on the photo agency and employed a different tack than what Khloe did. So he, as an offensive player himself, he actually did go on the offensive. And he said that this photographer and the Splash News agency, picture agency, were violating his right of publicity for financial gain. And what he said is that when they saw that he posted this photo of himself on his Instagram account, they went after him and said, okay, that'll cost you 40,000 United States dollars, otherwise we're going to sue you. And so he claimed that that was an effort to extort money from him, and that what they were doing was really exploiting his image for their financial gain. And so the argument that was made against Khloe in her case, he made against them and said, well, the only reason that photo of yours has any value is because it's of me, and I'm Odell Beckham Jr. and I'm the man. I mean, so this is actually a pending lawsuit. He just filed this lawsuit against the photo agency and the photographer, and claiming that it's violating his right of publicity. I think this is going to be interesting. I think eventually it's going to settle out. But if it doesn't, I think it raises the whole question of, where do you draw the line? You have on the one hand the celebrities writing publicity, you have copyright rights that the photographers have, and you have this whole concept of things are newsworthy, and what a football player does on the football field is newsworthy, and quite honestly, these celebrities, Beckham and the Kardashians and others, they benefit from that attention that they get from the paparazzi. I mean, that's kind of what drives their train. So we'll see how that plays out. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to talk about. This is how many people do yoga? Okay, good. All right, so you're familiar with Lululemon and their yoga mats, and they tried to get a trademark on the rounded corner of their. I think you can see it, but if you look further down, there's the yoga mat has kind of like on Lululemon. It's kind of square on one side and rounded on the other edge. And so they're trying to argue that this is something that really sets us apart, this little rounded edge thing here. And this was basically a failed attempt to try to get a trademark on that. But what they learned, and I think what other brand owners can take away from this, is that you can really create a trademark through your own advertising. If Lululemon said, well, look for our yoga mat with the rounded corners or edges, or in some way bring that to the attention of the consumer that this is something that sets us apart. You basically can create a trademark out of nothing. I mean, look at the UPS, the courier company. I mean, they took the color brown and basically made that a symbol of them and what they do, all through advertising, and it's just it has the potential to carve out for your company and your brands a space that can help build recognition and build market share and drive revenue and whatnot. So there I am floating in the ether, but I am actually standing on solid ground here. So I'll take any questions if anyone has any. I know we have a break coming up and some coffee, so I'll be around the rest of the day if you want to chat about any of this stuff. And I thank you for your time.